I mean, there probably is one difference. Bush made a point, I mean, propaganda point, of at least once a year visiting a mosque in Washington, D.C. to send a message that he has no animus to Islam as a religion. Obama, by the way, to this very day, has not stepped foot once in a mosque in Washington, D.C. or elsewhere. And I think it's quite deliberate for a man who spent his entire campaign denying that he's ever been a Muslim. And he denied that with the vehemence that accused communists used to deny during the McCarthy era that they ever were, or that they ever were communists. So his speech in Cairo, I think, was largely unjustifiably praised. I didn't see much new in it at the time, and I said so. I felt it was written better than George W. Bush's speeches, but that's not saying much. I felt like he was much better at theatrics, the way he greets, the way he stands, the fact that he doesn't swagger, that he uses better English, complete sentences, and the fact that he invoked Assalamu alaikum. But it seems to me we need much more substantive basis to evaluate the policy than his invocation of Assalamu alaikum. He praised Islam in the same sentence while speaking about the menace of terrorism, thereby creating an irreparable bond in the people's minds between Islam and terrorism, which is exactly the same thing with the Bush administration. So that was not different. He spoke about the American special relations with Israel, and just as George W. Bush's rhetoric on Israel fits much more with romantic literature than with foreign policy, same thing with Obama. I mean, they speak about relationship with Israel in terms of love, unbreakable bond, unshakable tie. I mean, stuff like you hear in relationships, in marriages, not in foreign policy. But as you know, they exclusively apply that kind of language to the relationship with Israel. And I'm sure to the satisfaction of Israel. I mean, as the beloved in this relationship between the United States and Israel. Obama spoke about the Palestinian state, so did George W. Bush. I mean, that's no different. I mean, Netanyahu accepts the Palestinian state. I mean, the notion that the mere reference to a Palestinian state should be a reason to celebrate is quite premature, it seems to me. I mean, the question is not a Palestinian state, or the question is not recognizing the Palestinian people. I mean, the Palestinian people do not have to be told that you exist, and that you never existed until the word Palestinian was uttered by a president of the United States. The question is not a Palestinian state per se, it is a question of what kind of Palestinian state, at what conditions, over what areas of historic Palestine. And in that sense, Obama and Bush do not differ whatsoever. They speak about a Palestinian state that is ill-defined, that is subject to a variety of Israeli conditions, preconditions, objections and restrictions and so on. But clearly, the Obama and Bush administration do not envision a Palestinian state in all 23% of historic Palestine, meaning West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem. The American administration has become now, there's talk about secret annexes and exchange of letters in which the American government, as was indicated in the Camp David negotiations in the Clinton administration, believe that the Israelis do not have the right, should not be obligated to leave all of the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem, but that if they want for strategic reason to maintain some part, that they should do that in negotiation with the Palestinians. So there is no insistence on an interpretation of Resolution 242 to call on Israel to withdraw from all lands occupied in 1967. There is a shift from the democracy project in Iraq to the stability project. I mean, that's one of my favorite elements of American foreign policy these days. But this is also not new. This started in the Bush administration. I mean, the Bush administration was willing to grant itself success by continually changing its goals in Iraq. So in the beginning, the goal was, of course, finding weapons of mass destruction. When no weapons were found, it was to have a democracy in Iraq. When no democracy was established in Iraq, it was to have a stable government in Iraq. I mean, that is how low the threshold is in Iraq today. To have a stable government in Iraq. I mean, if the stability of the Iraqi government is the goal, I mean, one has to concede Saddam Hussein, as tyrannical as he was, had the most stable government there was in Iraqi history. Just as Kim Jong-il has a very stable government in North Korea, as does Saudi Arabia. I mean, one thing you have to grant to oppressive government, they give you stability of government over a long period of time. And now this is the goal that is declared by Bush and Obama, to have a stable government in Iraq. Of course, not only they have no democracy in Iraq, I mean, far from having a democracy, I think that the Bush and Obama administration will be long remembered for creating another Islamic state next door to Iran, ruled by an Ayatollah. I mean, Iraq is today under the rule of an Ayatollah, I mean, for all intents and purposes. He, a man who left his house once in 7-8 years, Grand Ayatollah Sistani, is the most influential person in Iraq, much more than the commander of US troops in that country, in my opinion. He decides which laws are to apply in elections. He is to decide on the key contours of foreign policy and so on and so forth. So there's a shift now to the stability project in Iraq. Okay. Support for US allies in the Middle East, that has remained exactly the same in the Obama administration. America has not in any way distanced itself from the variety of tyrannical regimes that fill the Middle East map, and most of which are largely due to American military, economic, and political support. I mean, the entire Middle East is dotted with dictatorships, but left unmentioned is it is due to American support, from Morocco all the way to the Gulf region. I mean, the only ones that are not supported by America would be Syria and Iran, and it's not clear that the United States wants to overthrow the Sudanese government, because there are certain close cooperation in security matters between the two. Another element is to overstate the Iranian threat. This is inheritance from the Bush administration. Same thing, same rhetoric about the Iranian threat, and the notion that the potential nuclear weapons of Iran are much more threatening to peace than the existing nuclear weapons of Israel. I mean, that's the policy of Bush, and that's the policy of Obama. And the pretension that Israel's nuclear weapons do not exist. Because if you concede they exist, there's a whole set of legal, under international law or other laws, ramification, or American law. I mean, under American law, if a country surreptitiously pursues nuclear weapons, you have to cut off economic aid to that country. And of course, Israel is the largest recipient of aid. And let us remember that Pakistan, even though it acquired nuclear weapons, still receives, what, $11 billion since September 11? So these are like some of the similarities between the rhetoric of Obama and the Bush administration. Another element is to look at the policies of Obama as replicas or expansion beyond the Bush doctrine. I mean, the imperial project of world domination remains the same. I mean, I know it sounds so big, but I think the use of world domination applies to the American imperial role in the world today. I mean, this is why in the Iraq War in 2003, I was not of the opinion that it's all about oil. I think it was more about world domination. The United States, as clearly enunciated in the National Security Strategy of the United States, issued in September 2002 by the Bush administration, want to dominate the world and do not want any rivals or competitors. That's what Obama's doing. I mean, he doesn't use the same kind of tone of Bush, but the objectives are the same. And the best illustration of that is the deployment of troops and the expansion of wars in order to keep the dominance of the United States around the world. Obama expanded some of Bush's wars, added to them, elaborated on them, took them to a different place, and started new ones. Afghanistan, we all know, there's a surge that was ordered by the Obama administration, and the killing of civilians has continued at a high rate, and in some recent figures, it showed more civilians. The Taliban are killing Afghanistan civilians, but so is the Obama administration. The second example is the war in Yemen. The United States had a war in Yemen, was a party to a war in Yemen that was largely absent from your newspapers. And it was a war by proxy. The United States did participate. It sent its navy to blockade Yemen so that no weapons would arrive to the rebels in the north, the Houthi rebels. And it also supplied to the tune of not billions, millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, to the Yemeni dictatorship. A dictatorship that is fighting domestic enemies. And the notion that those enemies are linked to Al-Qaeda is a claim that has not been substantiated as of yet. I mean, in the South, the Southern separatist movement is socialist in background and orientation. Houthi rebels in the north are Shiite, Zaydi, a form of Shiite, or a Shiite sect. So the notion of links to Al-Qaeda just doesn't hold. And yet he was able to sell it to the Americans, who sold it to the Congress as a war against Al-Qaeda. And the Saudis, of course, participated fully with American support and at the behest of the Americans in that war. Of course, they did a lousy job, but they did participate in that war. And that's an Obama war. It should count on the CV of Obama as one of his wars. Deadly wars, resulting in the displacements of tens of thousands of people and so on. Third, another non-famous war going on under Obama watch, and that would be the war in Somalia. The Obama administration continued the policies of Bush by basically supporting the warlords in Somalia. These are corrupt warlords that have been rejected by the people of Somalia, and the United States quietly, as they put it in the New York Times, quietly dispatched special forces into Somalia. And Somalia, again, in every military intervention by the United States, in every internal war, anywhere around the world, they invoke the notion of links with Al-Qaeda. It should be said that in the case of Somalia, there have been claims made that the Islamic courts, which are against and the Islamic youth later, the later version of them, that they were linked to Al-Qaeda, is not proven, with the exception of individuals here and there. But the notion that it's a replica of Al-Qaeda has not been substantiated. There's also another war in Pakistan. But to be fair to Obama, he bragged about his willingness to launch attacks in Pakistan while he was running for office. His rival, no moderate on military and war, John McCain, attacked him. He said that it was irresponsible to even mention it, even if you want to do it. He said, you do that without declaring it. Obama was declaring it. And he lived up to his promises by having attacks by American drones or their proxies in Pakistan against targets in Pakistan and elsewhere. The use of drones for murder and killing has increased multiple times from the Bush administration. And as you know, these are killing without any trial. The people who are being killed not only sometimes can be innocent and are, but in some cases, but in all cases, they have not been put on trial. They have not been convicted of crimes. These are suspect. This is very much like one time when in 2001, during the war in Afghanistan, when American media reported that a convoy in Afghanistan was